Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Review, temporary name. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Dispatches from Elsewhere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. The episode was very funny, sweet, and also very endearing in many different avenues. Obviously, the biggest focus of this episode is on Simone, understanding who she is and kind of where she's coming from, where it's like Simone kind of has this situation where it's like she's kind of scared to kind of put herself out there, and it kind of explains like why she just kind of up and left the group at the end of last episode. It's because she kind of runs away. It's because she's afraid, because it's like it's a situation where she kind of creates this solitude of her own making, and when it's an opportunity to be around other people, she's so scared of kind of messing it up that she ends up running away. I can totally kind of get that. It's kind of like you're in this solitude that you kind of create for yourself. And so we learned that she works at a museum and everything. She basically says like, my job is to basically explain to people like the art and stuff like that. And I love like just the wackiness that is the show, in the sense of just like how it goes about portraying stuff. Like obviously she's actually talking to the painting, and the painting is like, oh, what about why the painting had to be like, why it's labeled as like woman whatever, and she's like, well, it's probably because, and she's like, don't be trying to explain that to me. And it's like, oh, how do you know? It's like, oh, you think you, and she's like, well, that, it's like, oh, they could put me beside this person, but you know, that person copies my moves or something like that. And Simone's like, well, that's not really true. It's like, well, how do you know? It's like, well, I'm an arts major. And like, oh, I have an arts major. It's kind of mocking Simone. But it is a situation where I thought was interesting, because like Simone asked, you know, the artist is like, is it a situation, were you lonely, or are you just kind of comfortable enough in the solitude? And it's like, oh, are you asking me that because you want me to kind of give you permission to kind of give into like, you know, you being alone? And it's like, yeah. And it's just kind of like, eventually you just kind of have to, you know, well, before she could really get some real clear advice, her boss comes over and just says, she's like, Jesus, Carl, the fact of the matter is, you don't walk up to someone and then whisper their name, and that's creepy. It's like, yeah, stop this person because this person's getting too close. It's like, yeah, they're just kind of like dressed up a certain way. They're kind of like vampires and stuff like that. Goes over, it turns out to be Bigfoot, and I love it. Jesus, and it's like, oh, Bigfoot. It's like, hey, oh, it's part of the game. Is it more of the game? Bigfoot. And just like, to me, those lines of Bigfoot, please. It just sounds so crazy when you think about that sentence, those statements out of context. But Simone kind of gets wrapped up in the game again, and lo and behold, who does she end up running into? Well, because I think she actually met with him because she was following clues initially. But then she ends up at Peter's work, and she's like, yeah, just so you know, from this day forward, it's your birthday, because I told them it's a surprise celebration because it's your birthday and everything. And like Peter's just like, oh, hey, he's so awkward and everything. He's like, oh, this is embarrassing. She's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'll go. He's like, I don't want you to know where I work. It's like, because he got embarrassed because like, this is my work. It's so boring. I didn't want you to see me like this, because he was hoping like, because him and Simone met under fun circumstances, so he wants her to kind of have an image of like, oh, I'm fun and everything. And she's like, oh, and I thought it was kind of adorable, because she thought like, oh, wait, you're not embarrassed by me, you're embarrassed, I'm seeing you at work and stuff like that. And he ends up getting like a fish dropped off, and then like because Simone ended up having batteries, and they end up going out to try, because Peter figures out where they're supposed to go next, and so they're on the bus and everything, and they're talking, and it's like, oh, you work in music? He's like, technically I don't work in music, I just work in data and stuff like that. So it was actually, you know, really nice and kind of a really sweet moment that they were kind of having. And it's just kind of like, apparently like she was in college, but wasn't it like she dropped out? And he's like, oh, why was that? And she's like, I was just dealing with some life stuff. And it's just like the moment it starts getting a little real personal on her side of things, she kind of shuts down a little bit. And it's like, oh, you know, let's just not talk for a little while. And Peter's just kind of like, okay. And I love, like, once again, kind of the fourth wall breaking thing of like, you know, it's mainly inside of Simone's head, but I like the way it's depicted. And it's like, next stop, you're tense and you unintentionally said something mean. Watch your step, be careful, watch your step. I love that, just like how that was, but then like, you know, and she apologized, because like, you know, it's just like, you know, I'm like an anomaly, and he's like, a few seconds of quiet, then Peter's like, anomaly, and she's like, what? He's like, anomaly, you said Amelie, and I think you dropped out the nom, and she's like, Amelie? He's like, you left out the nom. Anomaly. And she's like, oh, you've never seen the French film Anomaly. I was like, dude, it was just such an innocent and adorable moment, and I loved it. But they, end up in Fishtown. They're in front of that wall and everything, and they activate, put the batteries in the fish. And I love Peter being like, yeah, I like to put them all, the first two, I like to put them both up, and the other two, I like to put them down next. And Simone's just kind of smiling at just how adorable Peter is. And I love but it's like Clara, and it's like, oh, like, here's a trip around my town. The fact of the matter is, it's kind of like a place you don't want to be at night or during the day, but, there's magic here and beauty to it. So it's like, okay, they reference like, oh, I gotta find like your new pair of glasses. And they're like, oh, we should find the Fishtown optometrist. And Peter's like, yeah, I hope that's not the case because that sounds super boring. And someone's like, yeah. And so they end up going into a shop and they end up finding like 3D glasses. And it's like, oh, I think the dude's name was Salazar. Someone's like, yeah, oh, Clara, you're here for her, huh? You know where she is? It's like, no. And he's like, well, if you do run into her, give her a message. It's like, she broke her promise. And he starts getting a little scary and stuff like that. He's like, get out. And then Peter's like, okay. And he immediately gets out of there. And then it's just kind of, and I love Simone kind of winks at him like, you're really good at this. Kind of like, you're kind of doing really good at your job. Because once again, in her mind, this is all the game. But for Peter, he's like, yeah, I'm sorry about that. Like, I just kind of got really, tensed up and everything. He was scary. So after that, they end up heading to, eventually heading to that bar. And Simone kind of being like, and the bartender's like giving her nothing. And then like the jukebox is like, all right, that was this song. Now it's like, next up is Simone makes a fool of herself again, because, and I think that's why I'm saying I thought this episode was really endearing, because I was like, because I can understand, I've had those self-conscious thoughts, so I'm like, dude, I totally feel you. It's just that awkward thing of like, oh, why did I, that voice in your head that's like, oh, why did you say that stupid, oh, you're so dumb. I know that, like, I'm a very self-deprecating type of person. I have very low self-esteem. I say that with a joke and a smile because I kind of have to. It's my defense mechanism. But the fact of it is, I can kind of understand that. Like, I sympathize with it. I'm like, dude, I'm totally the same way. I totally get that. I think, like, I'm like literally a combination of Peter, because, like, Peter's, like, super awkward. Simone's awkward, too. But, like, hers is kind of, like, a very, like, she gets very much in her own head. And, Peter's just naturally awkward. So I'm, like, a combination of Peter meets Simone. Which I think that's why them gelling together so well, actually, like, I like it so much, I think is because it kind of, like, reminds me a little bit of myself. It's, which sounds so very, like, self-grandizing in some shape or form. Regardless, I'm going on a tangent and stuff like that, but it's like, oh, like, Clara, and then, like, the dude's like, because, like, someone was like, Clara, sent us, and he's like, I can't talk about it, the jejune, they might be listening, and they kind of look down, and there's a guy with a newspaper drinking chocolate milk, and Peter's like, well, couldn't he just be an older guy that's drinking chocolate milk in midday or something like that? So it's like, take the coin, and they end up going out the back door. They go to an elsewhere door, and it's this really cool, like, I don't know, like, it's got that aesthetic, like, I don't know what that aesthetic would be called. It's not Victorian. Well, I mean, I guess it's got that, like, for whatever, it has this, like, 20s feel to it, because, like, immediately in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, I don't know, because I don't remember what date Bioshock takes place, and for whatever reason, the room reminded me, it's like, that feels like a room out of Bioshock. I don't know why, just aesthetically, the elsewhere room, but I love it. It's like a little, like, little bike that Peter has to pedal, and Simone gets to watch a little elsewhere video. I even love that part right through it. Peter was getting tired. He's just like, she's like, no, come on, it's almost done. But I did like, once again, it's just like this show, like, changing. I like it when shows are able to do that, just change, like, the what is the word? The aesthetic of the show, and it went into, like, this little cinematic kind of explaining everything. The commander being like, oh, this is who I am. And I love that he's like, okay, this is who the Elsewhere Society is. You got it. Good. Moving on. This is our enemy, the June Society. You got it. Good. Moving on. Clara and all that. It's just like immediately boom, 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 boom. But then obviously the clue leads to the next place and everything. And Simone, like, it's like, wow, that was so amazing. And then Peter, she's like, wow, I thought you were just kind of in better shape than what you are. He's like, I did all the hard work. And it's like, she's like, I'll do it now and you get to go. He's like, really? But it's like the Jejune Society, well, the alarms go off and stuff like that. So they kind of run. And so I don't know. There was that interesting moment of like, because like Peter's like, oh, I'm like having fun, and then she's like, she is too, and he asked her like, what's her favorite part? She's like, that part of your brain where it's kind of like either you feel like awesome or you're like, oh, you're a total piece of shit, or I forgot the exact wording that she said, which I'm like, once again, I'm like, dude, I totally get it. My brain kind of does the same thing, and Peter was kind of like, yes, kind of like, no, did he really? But she's like, from now, that voice was actually quiet, so because she's just legitimately just having fun. And it's like, oh, are you afraid of are you afraid of heights? And Peter's like, I don't, maybe. And then it's like, oh, we got to climb up top to see the sunset and everything. And then like it's like, okay, let's go see. And then you could tell she was a little winded. I was like, what's that about? I was like, oh, because just because of exercise. But it's like, because Peter's like, oh yeah, I'm doing a lot of exercise today, but I guess it's like, I was like, oh, is she afraid of heights? And it's like, oh, she's clearly afraid of heights. It's like, you go check it out, but he's telling her to come over, but she's like, no, you just describe it to me. He's like, I don't think I can. And I thought an adorable moment of him being like, I'll be your guardrail. I was like, I'd be your guardrail. I'm a sucker for stuff like that, dude. To me, that just like, that spoke volumes to me. I was like, oh, that's super adorable. Like, and she walks over and she holds onto him like he actually is a guardrail that she's peering over. Honestly, that was beautiful scenery. That like that across the building top like that was beautifully drawn. I was like, oh my god, that's actually really beautiful. And they listened to the fish, and Clara was like, the fact of the matter is they would come up there, and it made her feel like magic didn't exist. It's that situation of kind of like turn to your partner and say what's on your mind, because at first when you actually talk to her and actually say what you need to say, you'll realize it isn't actually that hard. And so they turn to each other, and Peter says like, for him it's like he's feeling something now that he's never really felt before. And for the first time, it's like when he actually met her, after dancing, in particular dancing with a Bigfoot, that the fact of the matter is he ran into her. Obviously that scene from last episode where he was hearing music, he's like, I heard music. At first I was thinking I was having a stroke, but it's just because she made him feel a certain way. And it's like, oh, I was like, oh. And then, but when the time came, like Simone sees a version of herself being like, please don't mess this up for me again. But Simone kind of goes, I can't do this, I'm sorry, and kind of walks away. And she's trying to continue like the whole like, oh, let's go on this quest, let's finish this up. It's like, oh, we could go. But Peter just kind of loses all interest and is like, no, I'm just going to go. Like, I'm sure we'll meet again. And Simone's like, don't you want to finish this? And he doesn't say anything. And she feels bad because she's like, I ruined, like in her mind, it's like, I ruined it again. I think it's that thing of like you proactively like, it's basically you stop something from going too far because you're afraid like I'm going to mess it up. And so that's what it is. Once again, I totally resonate with Simone on that. And so when she got back home, she talked to her nana. It's like, oh, you got that look on your face. She's like, what? Like that look like you hate yourself. And so they basically, and it was kind of a really, really what kind of threw me for a loop. It's like, it's like, I forgot what it was exactly initiated it, but basically her nana was kind of like bringing up the fact is that like, oh, it's always kind of a transitional period, whenever Benson gets a new partner, which I'm like, what's up with the SVU reference? Why are we so invested in SVU or something? Part of me was wondering, it's like, is Jason Segel a big like SVU fan? I mean, when you actually think about it, I mean, to be fair, like, Benson had one, there were transitional periods, obviously, even throughout earlier points of it, but most of the series, at least, the first, half of the series, at least where it is to date, like the first half of the series, her and Stabler were like partners for like forever. Once again, they had their bumpy roads. I've not watched SVU in a very long time. It's been a couple years since I've seen it, just because SVU, like legitimately, it is the most depressing crime drama in my personal opinion. Just it feels like there's no winning. It's just always like kind of bummer endings. So I think that's just why I have not seen it in years. Regardless, I'm going tangents and all that. But Simone's, because obviously, like, her nana's trying to explain, like, oh, yeah, like, everyone's kind of got their own crap. It's just kind of like putting it out there about, like, yeah, this is my bag of crap and it smells like shit, Because Simone wasn't worried about other people's stuff. It was more so about her own stuff that she kind of keeps, dragging herself down with. And, her nana was basically saying, like, just scream it loud, like, and, that way everyone knows that we're on the same page of like, yeah, this is all the crap that I'm carrying around and it smells like shit, And I just thought that was kind of a very like like I said, I like the conversation. I thought it was, pretty neat. And when Simone meets up with Fredwin and Janice, sadly there's no Peter. And I like that thing of like, okay, so basically Peter and Simone went on a different adventure than Janice and Fredwin did. Basically, Fredwin and Janice's side of things is more like, oh, go to the Jejune Society. But then like Simone and Peter's thing was all about, oh, go elsewhere. And so it's like, okay, Fredwin's kind of taking this as like, oh, they're trying to divide us and stuff like that. And we don't need to make it, because the whole thing is like, because obviously it's like, the Elsewhere Society represents kind of, this freedom, and everything beautiful, kind of anti-capitalism, whereas the Jejune Society, at least, how Janice was kind of putting it, kind of represents like, kind of like, structure and kind of stuff like that, being an adult and stuff like that. Because it's like, from Janice's perspective, it's like, oh, the Elsewhere Society is like, like, here's fight the power. All right, what's your solution? We don't really have one. So it's kind of like you're saying that there's a problem, but you're fighting a problem, but you don't quite have a solution for it yet. So like fighting is fine and dandy, but you need to actually have a solution to kind of help mitigate the problem or whatever. But you had Fredwick bringing up the fact is of like, all right, we're gonna why choose? Let's go both places. Like, because obviously timing wise, we can make it to both. And it's like, what was it? He was like, yeah, like, how do you guys think of my idea? And Janice is about to say something. He's like, good, I agree. Yes, I'm right. And I'm like, I love that kind of already, once again, showing you Fredwin's personality defective matters. It kind of doesn't matter what you have to say, which is interesting because it seems like the pairing, because it seems like at least Simone and Peter, it seems like there's gelling there, at least from the perspective we got. It seems like Janice and Fredwin are very like complete opposites, but it seems like he's very like a kind of lone wolf independent type of dude. I love it. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna try and call Peter. Wait, he gave you his phone number? It's like, no, I backtraced I actually have all your phone numbers now. But Janice seems like the one that's more down for the partnership, where he seems like he's the conspiracy theorist who's willing to kind of go kind of lone wolf to a certain extent. But basically they go to the the Elsewhere place that's basically an anti-Jejune society thing. And they kind of end up splitting up. And Simone kind of gets, all those people kind of shouting and stuff like that. She's hearing the music and stuff like that, like from earlier in the episode when she was at that Pride Parade. But when the time came for her to speak, she kind of ran away. But she runs into Peter, but she's trying to call Peter, but he won't hear her. So she grabs the microphone and says, Peter! And then everyone stops and kind of looks at her. And for her, and I really like it, like I said, it's a situation of like, I'm sorry, I kind of like turned down what you were trying to say. It's not like I didn't kind of feel the same way, but I'm kind of scared. Like, I am afraid, what's kind of afraid to talk about the fact is I'm a mess. And for her, it's like, it's going to turn into a situation of like, obviously, like if we did try that right now with me being a mess, it kind of blow up in our faces, and then I'd eventually hate your face. And I like this game is fun, and it's made me feel good in a way I haven't really felt in a while or a long time. And she says, and I don't want to give that up. Neither do I want to give up, because I like your face too. So it's like, it's a situation of she doesn't want to give up either one. So can we just kind of stay friends for now? Like because like the flirting just kind of caught her off guard because she doesn't want to ruin what's between them. And Peter kind of accepts that. And like I said, it's just so sweet and endearing, and I really like that. Kind of getting that perspective, because it's still a thing of they are all together, but obviously the episode seems like they focus on one particular character. At least that's how it seems like they're heading. At least we can assume that's what the first 4 episodes are like. That's why I'm wondering what the rest of the season is going to look like. Are we going to focus on other characters like that while still focusing on this main group? I'm curious to see like what the structure of that will ultimately end up looking like. But everyone, like after Simone said what she said, everyone was kind of celebrating, kind of clapping and everything. It's like, yeah, and she was able to kind of put it out there, despite like how uncomfortable or just how like nervous it made her. She was able to kind of speak her mind, which even Peter was like, yeah, I'm sorry I kind of acted the way I did too. I get very nervous, but I'm gonna try and kind of relax. So but sadly at the end we see Fredwin kind of sneaks into the back of Octavio's car. And Janice, no, get up, and it's like, we gotta go save him. That's my partner. That's my partner. It's like, pedal faster. And her kind of taking charge a little bit. So it's like, all right. So obviously the next episode is going to be us focusing on Janice, which I'm very interested to see. Because it seems like we're not necessarily, we're going a little bit in reverse in certain regards, because obviously, like, we get a little cut of like Janice's life, a little explaining her Simone's situation is what I meant to say. We kind of got little bits and pieces of her past, kind of a little bit like Peter, but obviously we went a little in depth more with, Simone's situation of never kind of feeling like she fit in. So I'm curious, but it's mainly like a continuation. So by the time we cut back to Janice, we'll get a little background story, but it's mostly going to be a continuation forward with the story while also kind of developing her character at the same time. And I think that's kind of a neat element, rather than us getting a full background. Once again, we get like the 2-minute background, like kind of did with Peter, and then just kind of march along to the beat to everything. So I'm very, very interested to see, where ultimately all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.